All right, let's get started. I want to be mindful of everybody's time. Welcome to DRI Foundation's Women in Business Continuity Management's October Power Hour. My name is Mitzi Harler. I have the privilege of chairing WBCM along with an incredible all-volunteer executive committee, and we're thrilled to see so many of you here. Whether you are a longtime WBCM member or joining us for the first time, you are in the right place. If you're still learning about WBCM, it's easy. We stand on three strong pillars: mentorship, scholarship, and networking. And we have one clear goal: supporting women as they advance professionally, which sometimes means also addressing how we grow personally as well. Every single thing that we do is rooted in that mission. Our power hours, they keep us connected between DRI's annual conferences. Quick plug, I hope to see many of you at DRI 2026 in Jacksonville, but they're exclusive to our community. Today's topic, though, is just too important to keep behind closed doors, so we threw the doors wide open, and we're happy that you're here. That's who we are. That's the DNA of WBCM. We share the playbook for success. Even if only one of us takes the time and energy to create that winning play, we share it because we're invested in collective success. Before we dive in, I want to thank our sponsor, BDO, for making this Power Hour possible. And I'm excited to introduce our speakers, Sydney Weinstein and Alexa Safel. They're going to guide us through how to approach data as perhaps one of the most powerful tools in your toolbox. It's a real asset that we have. Welcome, Sydney. Welcome, Alexa. I have to say, as a hiring manager, if I was going to backfill a role, typically I would take the job description, give it a once over, update it a bit, and then, send it off to my recruitment partner. I don't think I could do that anymore. I need someone who knows the professional practice areas, but I also kind of need a technologist. And I'm thinking if that's what I need, then maybe that's what I need to become.
Awesome. Thanks, Mitzi. Hi, everybody. I'm Sydney Weinstein. I'm a director in BDO's resilience practice. We're helping clients to design and operationalize their resilience programs. And as Mitzi said, we really think that data and tech are two real keys to success in this department. Before we get started, I did want to just say BDO is a proud sponsor of WBCM, and our team has been involved with WBCM over the years. I myself am involved in the mentorship program. I really encourage everybody on the call to get involved, and Mitzi will share at the end of our session how we can do that. I am joined here by my teammate, Alexa. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Alexa Safel, and I'm a senior associate in the resilience practice with Sydney. I work with clients to help design resilience programs and integrate technology. And I'm excited to share our takeaways from all of these experiences as they relate to data with you today. On our agenda today are three major topics: new ways to think about risk and data, so positioning yourself and your team as strategic advisors to the business; how to prepare your data, tips on how to prepare yourself and your data for working with other data teams; and lastly, rethinking the skills that your team needs. As risk professionals, what are those roles and capabilities you need on your team to effectively use your data? So first, let's discuss our resilience mindset. You may be familiar with some of these topics, but we're highlighting them as things to be intentional about in your career.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that both you and Mitzi brought up. Yes, we're familiar with these concepts and data, but why is it important? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. The reality is that resilience can take a lot of effort, administrative work, and we have limited resources. So we want to understand how we can move from the administrative to the strategic. And you see that here on the left. This program is heavy administratively. We are collecting BIAs and dependencies manually and really taking a lot of the legwork for the business. On the right is where we're looking to move towards, which is that strategic mindset where we're not just collecting the data, but we're really analyzing it and giving the business insights, really. So one way to do this is by leveraging technology. All right, so how do we get there? How do we move from that more administrative approach, which you see here on the left? We call this a full service model. So that's where you and your team, you're scheduling meetings with the business. You are even keying in dependencies, process information, process definitions on their behalf, and you're really doing all the work on their behalf. If you have a small organization or a smaller scope, this might work. But as a program continues to grow, we see that this is really an unsustainable approach. So we see organizations moving towards the center of excellence model. This is where your team is providing the standards, the tools, and the templates so that the business can proactively manage this themselves with your support. And of course, in this role, really, you're more in that position of reviewing their data, identifying gaps and managing them rather than collecting the data. And like everything in life, it's not black or white. You know, you might fall somewhere in between here, but today we're going to talk about how to move that needle more towards that center of excellence model. So like Alexa said, we have the opportunity to work with a lot of different organizations across sectors. And here are really those core pillars that we see in successful programs. We've also, learned a lot of lessons throughout these years and have those lessons to share with you. So one starts with having a repeatable process. So do you have your policy in place? Are there standards to support that? Does the business understand what their responsibility is? Two is not only defining what that process is, what does the annual cycle look like, but then socializing that with your stakeholders in the business, your peers in cyber, IT, third party, and so on. And then your leadership as well. So just socializing the expectations of what is happening, and do they know how to do what you're expecting them to? So if you're asking them to do a BIA, is it very clear on how they should do that? And then three, is there a platform or technology or destination where someone can go to access all of their business continuity, disaster recovery, crisis management plans, and planning documentation? And then four, which is really the foundation for all of this, is consistent and reliable data. If the data isn't good, the business will not use it to drive decisions. And of course, that's what we want to do with our data. So I think that's really one of the most important pillars that we see.
Okay. So we know that data can sometimes be a touchy subject, but it's an important one that we don't want to shy away from. We want you to understand how to prepare and position yourself to evolve and be of more value to the organization. And a great way to do that is by using risk data as an asset. So think of your risk data as currency. How can you use that data to support the organization? As we discussed, you can use that data to put yourself in more of a strategic role. However, it's predicated on the data being good data. So we want to hear from you. We know that data quality is a challenge for many organizations. So we're going to run a quick poll for everyone. And we want to know, how would you rate the quality of your resilience data? And we'll give everyone about a minute to submit their responses. Would you say your risk and resilience data is poor, fair, good, or excellent?
All right, so far we have majority on fair, a few good, a little less poor, and 3% excellent. So that's some good news. I think one thing to note here is maybe not all of our data is created equal, where my application data might be very clean, my third-party data may not be as clean. So that's just something to consider too, is where do you have the good data, and maybe drive insights out of that while you work on improving the quality of other parts of your data.
Okay. Thanks everyone who provided some answers to the poll. It looks like FAIR is taking the lead, or I guess staying in the lead. So if you answered poor or fair, that's okay. We're here today to talk about how we can improve our data. And if you answered good or excellent, that's fantastic. It's all about continuous improvement, and we're always bringing in new data. So these are things that you can keep in mind the next time you're intaking that new data. On the topic of continuous improvement, we want to review some of the guiding principles on how we can achieve better data quality. So first, trustworthy data builds confidence in decisions. When data is accurate and reliable, leaders can make decisions faster and with more certainty. Trustworthy data reduces second guessing and supports clear communication during a crisis or a disruption. Secondly, complete data informs incident response and investment. So having all of the necessary data means teams can respond to incidents more effectively and spot gaps. And complete data also helps justify investments in resilience by showing the full picture of risk. Next, quality data powers AI and analytics. High quality data is the foundation for successful AI and analytics. As we said, bad data leads to bad insights. Investing in data quality means smarter predictions and better risk management overall. And lastly, automated data frees up stakeholders for strategy. So automation takes care of routine data collection, so teams can focus on analyzing the results and planning ahead. As we mentioned, with less of that manual work and administrative burden, you have more time for big picture thinking, strategizing, and innovation. So we took you through some of the guiding principles, but what does this actually mean for us on a daily basis? Let's talk through upskilling yourself, strengthening your data governance, and preparing your data. So first, upskilling yourself. Some examples of how you can do that is working with data professionals in your organization, talking to your industry peers about how they leverage data, and or joining new projects to get experience. This is actually an example from my own experience. I previously worked as a crisis management analyst for a financial organization. When I joined the crisis management team, they had great data, but the way that it was structured and visualized was an area of opportunity for us to improve. So I met with data analysts and the crisis management team, and really what I wanted to do was understand how the data was input and what fields were most important for decision making. And based on that information and a couple of data visualization courses, I was able to update our dashboard to include data that supported decision making during crises.
That's pretty cool. And maybe this is a topic for either our WBCM colleagues or a power hour where we can share, like you said, work with other professionals to see how they're using their data, what their dashboards look like. It's really helpful to work with others, either in your industry or outside, to see what they're doing. All right, so strengthening data governance. This is really the rules around your data. So it's not just about what our resilience team is doing with the data, it's what are our peers doing as well. So the IT team managing application data, cyber and InfoSec, third party, legal, all of these other teams that we may be working with, we want to ensure that we're proactively setting up channels to be able to have discussions about data with them. And second one we have here is be creative where you can about where you can get your data and how to automate it. So in every case possible, we want to remove any manual entry of data and pull from a golden source where possible. Sometimes we know this might not be possible. We've seen, where an organization has up to 5 different vendor systems. So, I think just start small and where you have the most influence, best relationships in the organization. As Alexa was mentioning in her previous role, the crisis team was working with the data team. It's all about your relationships in the end. So I think start with where those relationships are the strongest. And that is a good place to start with your data conversations. And one more thing I was just thinking about as you were saying that, Alexa, is sometimes when we bring together teams related to resilience, third party, crisis, BC, DR, and we start talking about our processes overlapping, there may be some, because we might operate in a silo, sometimes it can happen. Using data rather than our process to drive our conversations can also disarm folks in the organization and be way more relaxed and comfortable to share information and talk about how we collaborate. When you talk about process, a lot of times people, may hesitate because we want to continue to do the things the way we're used to doing them versus changing. But again, driving it from a data perspective really changes the conversation. So that's just something to think about. But just like you, prior to BDO, I was at a pharmaceutical company and we did two things with our data. Very practical, so we're going to get in the weeds here. The first one is in our resilience platform, we created a rule that when a new application was added that was linked to our CMDB, if it wasn't in there, then it would allow the user to add one, but it would then go to the resilience and IT team for review to ensure this isn't shadow IT, or maybe it goes under an alias and we need to connect it to an existing application, just to ensure that we're not continuously getting bad data into the system. Now, you might say, okay, that might take a lot of time for my team. Yes, it definitely is additional time, but collecting year or two of the messy application data, cleaning that up is also a pretty big lift. So it's just an option for you. And the second one is, I know that we all want to or are required to ask our vendors resilience related questions, but it's often hard to get into that vendor onboarding process or vetting process to say, oh, I have another questionnaire for the vendor. So typically we know that a vendor will always go through a privacy questionnaire. So we were able to partner with the chief privacy officer to add 2 or 3 resilience related questions into their questionnaire so that it was embedded into their process. So we don't always need net new processes. We can sometimes be creative and share with others.
And Sydney, I think to your earlier point about working with other teams, not just data teams on your data, there's also that give and take. So that's a really great example about how you were able to embed with the vendor questionnaire, just keeping in mind that, you can also share your risk data with other teams and use that as an asset to kind of, like I said, do that give and take between the teams.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was just thinking of the resilience team, but you're thinking about giving back to our peer groups, and that's a great point. And like Alexa said, sometimes we'll map that. What is the data we give and take to each of the teams? What does that look like? And you can be surprised by how much you can really benefit from what each other are doing. All right, so this is admittedly the most unglamorous part of this discussion, but arguably my favorite and most important. So preparing your data, you have to be ruthless and you have to be honest with yourself. Number one, evaluate the quality of your data. I think a lot of you are being honest because you said fair, good. I'm guessing that's because there's some bad, some good. But I'm glad to hear that everybody, has done that really honest assessment, because as we mentioned earlier, if we want business insights and the business to be confident in our data, it definitely needs to be reliable. So, we have, let's say I have fair data today and I've identified, the parts that are good, bad, fair, all of that. Then I need to really dig in and see what are the gaps and the inconsistencies. A lot of times this will be, I have duplicates or I have fuzzy matches on vendors and applications. You all are familiar with this when, someone entered something just a little bit different, but it actually is the same. So those are fuzzy matches. And, or old data, we have inactive applications or vendors. So identify very clearly what are those issues with the data, and then develop a plan to better it. And we know that this might take collaboration between you and other teams to ensure that you, one, are driving from the same list and you agree on the approach. So that goes back to data governance. When we get ready to clean up our data, we have to be very clear with all of the data owners that we're on the same page. Here is an example. We worked with a company that was maintaining two different lists of applications. One was the CMDB with IT, and one was the resilience teams. They were maintaining an application list in their platform as well. And both had, I would say, good, perhaps not excellent data, but they knew that, the first thing there was, one, they had a good stakeholder engagement and relationship. The head of resilience and head of IT said, we know we have an issue we need to resolve here, so we're going to. So they developed an initiative, and we know this is quite a big undertaking because it's thousands of records, right? So we took each of the lists, they worked with a data analyst, and that analyst was able to identify all of the duplicates, fuzzy matches, and all of that. And then where records were truly different on each list, we created governance and kind of a rule list, checklist for us to go through to say, does IT approve of this change? Does the resilience team approve of this change? And it was also went down to the field level. So let's say we're looking at application data. We're looking at the application name, the RTOs, and the application owner. And in some cases, the resilience team had the better data on application owner or whatever it may be. So we went down, we got very technical, very detailed. And what came out of this was a very clean list of their applications. So these are the type of projects, again, not glamorous, but can really change the way that you're able to operate, make decisions off the data, and share it with other teams. Because like Alexis said, if we want to share this data with other teams, we have to be confident that it's good.
Yeah. I think another example, Sydney, when you were talking about applications that came to mind for me was the technology that we're implementing where the resilience team has kind of, I'm not sure the right word, but kind of like a gate set up in their technology where a business process owner can enter an application. And if it's a net new application, it gets routed to the resilience team so that they can review it before it's entered officially into the system. That way, if the application goes by a different name that's not known to the business, that we're not creating duplicates and we are ensuring that data quality.
For sure. Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think anywhere we can do that is helpful. I see where third parties are more tricky because generally that's either not ever managed centrally or it's managed in multiple places. So I think that's where I see a little bit more challenge in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Okay, so we know from experience that it can be challenging to work with data teams. Something we have to keep in mind is that data analysts are not resilience specialists. So they can help us do a lot of stuff with our data, but they need to know exactly what we need from them. So we asked one of the data analysts on our team how we as resilience specialists can be better collaborators, and here's what they said. First, translating your business problems into clear data questions. The more specific you are about your goals and what you want to do with your data, the better that they can help you. Sharing context. Explain why you need the data and what decisions it's going to drive. Bring your resilience expertise. So helping validate findings, spotting anomalies, and interpreting results in the context of risk and resilience. And lastly, involve them early. Data can inform strategy, not just report outcomes. Early collaboration leads to better solutions.
Yeah, and I think I can attest, I've done this poorly before, so I can say really understanding the business problem that you're trying to solve and being very clear about that with your data partners will yield better results. And that may take time. That may take you iterating with your team to understand what exactly is it. Handing over your data to the data team is not going to get you very far. And like Alexa said, it is helpful if you give them like the end-to-end view or the top-down view of what you're trying to achieve. So if you're trying to understand, a complex concentration risk on a location or a vendor or something like that, then let's say why, at what level, we need to understand it at a business function. I think giving them all of the things that we take for granted and we know, giving all of that context is really important because you will find that your results will reflect the amount of detail and information you provided. So we are the resilience, subject matter folks, and they are manipulating the data. And so once they get to know resilience a little bit better, they'll be able to provide really like more ideas around how we could use it. But initially, I think it's really being very detailed in your purpose and your audience. I think the audience is pretty big as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to keep these data analysts very busy. We have lots of ways that we can work with the data teams. And it could be someone in your organization, a data team that you can reach out to. It might be someone on your team that's just really good with data and Excel and models. But first, they can help us with that unglamorous task of aggregating and cleaning the data, because it really can be quite a big lift. And you need someone that can manage that amount of data. So that's one thing. Second is identifying those patterns. So I mentioned concentration risk. Where do we see a lot of reliance on a specific process, location, application, vendor? What we see is oftentimes, yes, procurement's tracking, what teams or what services or vendors providing or supporting, but we don't see it from our side, which is how many business processes are relying on that vendor. So we can partner with the contracting, procurement, third-party teams and give them that information back to show, we have a high concentration risk. Do we need to address our contracts because we have this data? And then reporting and dashboards, as we just kind of mentioned, you can have, and Alexa mentioned in her example, you can have actually excellent data, but if it's not properly visualized and not at the right level, it's not going to be helpful for the business. So it will be helpful to map your different personas or stakeholder groups. So that could be leadership, that could be functional leads, that could be process leads, however you want to slice and dice it. But define what those stakeholders are and then define what they want to see and actually work with them and talk to them and say, hey, in that last incident, did the dashboard help? Do we need to tweak it? Or, do you need an operational dashboard of where your function is within the OPRAS cycle? So I think it's not only what we think, it's about what we can help the business with. And we definitely want to ask them straight up what, and collaborate with them. So this is one of the exciting things that having great data can really yield. is simulations, I think is the last one there, but simulations, if we have good data on the business processes and all of our dependencies, then we're able to ask the data questions. If this happens, this vendor goes out, what is the impact? And we can start to run simulations on that and also make the scenarios or the simulations a little bit more complex. And we have a lot of, people coming to us to say, I want to run simulations. And they are not as interesting when you don't have good data, because everybody just keeps questioning the data. So I think that's one way to get, to drive interest in improving that data, is saying, hey, if we get to this point, we can start running simulations and understanding if there is an event to occur, what is the impact? Yeah. Then, okay. So we talked a lot. Well, we've just talked a lot, but we talked a lot about data and technology. But we know that really everything we do relies on people. So we're going to back up and we're going to talk about the people. And Mitzi, I really appreciate what you said at the start of this, which is, I might not copy and paste my new job description if I were hiring. And that's what we're seeing, is that, some of our more traditional ways of thinking about resilience are starting to change. Our field is changing. The skills that will, take you further are changing. And so that's not only looking at our new hires and interns and all of that, it's also, like Alexa mentioned, it's upskilling ourselves. So it's a little bit of both, I think. And, we might not all have the ability to be hiring a specific person for each of these domains, but we can reach out into our organization for help on these things. We could hire and make sure that that person has some of these skill sets, or we can help develop them in our existing team. So some of those areas that we identified as kind of newer skill set that actually some folks are hiring these types on their team. First is data analyst. We kind of covered that, right? But great to have that person in your team or in your organization. The second is user experience specialist. So I know a lot of us do use resilience platforms, or you have a software that you manage. It's so important that that is user friendly. That the interaction with that system reflects on our reputation as a team. If someone has a negative interaction with that system, they're going to be like, oh, this business continuity team. So we don't want that to happen. And we can really do this by engaging people whose job it is to streamline systems and make it look on brand, really easy and simple. And I would say that extends not just into technology, but also any communication that you're sending out. If you have someone who's really good, if you have a branding team, if you have someone internally who's good at, PowerPoint and design, ask them to help you, because the look and feel will really help that resonate within your organization. And also know your culture, right? Some companies, people read pre-reads and look at videos, and some don't. They'll just show up to a meeting. So know your audience. And then your tech liaison and AI. So that's really who in the organization, if you're either, that could be procurement, if you're looking to purchase or get a resilience platform. But then once you have the platform, what are you doing? So we will see where folks will get a resilience platform and they really don't think through what happens after I get it. How do I maintain it? How do I improve it? And I know I had that experience prior to BDO where we purchased a resilience software. And at the time, honestly, I didn't think through all of the maintenance and sustain. So, definitely learned some lessons there, but it's who's doing that? Is it someone in your organization? Is it you? Be very clear before you go into that process as to whose responsibility it is and resources and all of that stuff, how you're going to manage it going forward. In some cases, folks will hire like a system admin for, the system to support. And then with the changing regulatory landscape, always great to have someone that you can consult, whether internally or externally, on the changing regulatory environment. And not only those changes, there's also systems and platforms that you can subscribe to that can alert you of these, as well as I'm sure your legal and regulatory teams. But it's good to know ahead of time, and some of these systems or resources can support you with flagging, hey, this is coming up, we need to get ready, or, we're going to wait on changing our approach, just kind of inform your program and your process improvements. All right. So we talked a lot about data and upskilling ourselves and working with new types of skill sets. We wanted to hear a little bit from you if you have any questions. I don't see any in the chat yet. Oh, yes, I do. Awesome. So we'll take a look there. Mitzi's going to jump in here as well. And she will also, once we're kind of concluded, she will share with us how exactly we can get involved with WBCM. Welcome back.
Thank you both. Yeah, this topic is near and dear to my heart. I think when we talk about future workforce planning, we really need to reevaluate the skill sets. And we talk about upskilling a lot, but I also think of it in terms of reskilling. AI without the good data is just not going to give us what we need. And that's kind of the buzzword. That's all we hear. But we really need to be, like you said, have that data hygiene behind it. And it's tricky. So as we're kind of waiting for questions to come in and combing through some of the questions, one that's kind of come in, or what are some of the ways you've overcome working with groups that are siloed? Because many of us have matrixed organizations, heavily decentralized organizations, and either they cannot or they're not particularly interested in helping, honestly, with what they'll call your project, even though resilience is for the greater good of the organization. So how do you break down those barriers?
Yeah, Kathleen, I'm sure that's a lot of people that resonates with them. And then this is pretty common, right? Because all of our groups are working towards our goals. Sometimes we're not cross-pollinating. And like I said, I think structuring a conversation around data is very helpful. And Alexa mentioned talking about how we can benefit, each group can benefit from each other's data. So, you're already mentioning, Catherine, how to sell it. Yeah, we have to sell it. We have to show the value of our data. So you can say to the DR team, hey, I know you have your recovery time capabilities. These are the recovery time objectives we've collected from the business. And on top of that, we know which are our most critical businesses. So maybe let's focus there and have a discussion around it and bring them a sample data set of something that might be of interest to them and focus the conversation around that. And or also understanding what their strategic objectives are for that organization. So that's a very helpful way. When you know what someone's goal is and you can help them achieve it, that's a really good way to get goodwill and develop that relationship and make it reciprocal ultimately.
Another one for you. Manny's ripping this from the headlines. AWS. Right, internet was broken yesterday. So what are some of the ways that you can account for, kind of software as a service, third-party priority recovery? It doesn't really matter if you say, I'm here. That's a nice story. Their RTOs and RPOs are often what they are. How do you account for that?
Yeah, so great question. I think as we all know on this call, we want to understand where our most critical business processes and impacts are when something like that happens. So again, if we're collecting the right data and it's of good quality, that will help us do that. But like you said, some things are actually out of our control. So what do we do in the meantime? In some cases, that will then shift into cyber and incident crisis management. So I think we're working between the different disciplines here where, some of this, when it becomes out of the business's hands, essentially, then it's going to our crisis team. And from there, it's really about communications and communicating to our customers, to our vendors, external suppliers, and all of that, and managing it from a communications perspective. And then once things come back online and they are now in our control, one, continuing to communicate, and then two, focusing resources on our most critical businesses, services, products.
Alexa, Sydney, it's easy to talk about reskilling. It's easy to talk about the need for kind of data fluency. It's not easy to get, especially if you're not in an organization that is front and center on training and, not just saying you need to be able to do these things, but actually teaching you how to do that. If you don't have that, are there some resources that you're aware of that, could be helpful?
I'm going to point to AI. So if your organization company has its own approved AI, that's a great place to start. You can even try uploading some of your data if your system allows it, and playing with the data there. If your company does not, you can use, obviously nothing related to your organization, but really interrogate ChatGPT, Gemini about, or any AI about data, any data quality, data governance, data strategy from a generic perspective, and ask it to teach you, hey, I'm a resilience professional and this is my job, and how can I use data strategy in my day-to-day? I think really just asking it questions and getting used to it is a really great way. I know I do that, and we're lucky enough to have AI at work, but it's a great tool, and you can ask it all of the kind of dumb questions you want to, because it's not going to judge you. And also, like you mentioned, reach out to your peers, those in WBCM or wherever your networking groups are, and see what other folks are doing.
Not only is it not going to judge you, it's going to congratulate you. What a great idea. Even if you have the dumbest question, cheese on ice cream, you're genius. It's just going to say, it's a little bit of a boost. Lex, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. It's very validating. I would say, just from my experience, I wish that I had used AI in my example that I gave about, kind of giving our dashboards a facelift. I did just go to the old fashioned LinkedIn learning courses. So there are always those as well.
Yeah, but I think it's really important to know what the mix is, right? Because we all learn in different ways. Some of us read, some of us watch, some of us have to do. I think that all of us are going to have to become prompt engineers, right? It's based on how you ask, what you ask. And so prompt engineering, you can even use AI to say, I want to get to the root of this problem. Can you help me refine my prompt? And you start with your question, and it can actually help shape, the best way to ask that question. I'm going to throw another resource out there for folks for free online training. Many of you probably know about it, but it's called Allison with one L. And there are a lot of free certification programs. It's just kind of watching the class. It's on demand. So if you're looking at just basic AI literacy or AI governance, some of those topics, I think that's a really good starting point. Then you can kind of figure out what you want to become an expert in, and then maybe focus on finding in-depth things there. Okay, another question for you. Disaster recovery, crisis management, business continuity, emergency response. A lot of this sounds the same. And so one of our questions for Mary is, how do you differentiate between disaster recovery and resiliency planning? And how do you work with leaders through these two streams?
Yeah, so we see disaster recovery as that restoration after a disruption. And also, of course, doing exercises, disaster recovery exercises. But that's more around your infrastructure, your IT systems, and recovering your operations. Whereas resilience planning, I would think, is more business continuity side, and more on the business side. So typically that's more before an event, during and after, where I would say disaster recovery is more after the event. The incident has occurred and you're responding to it with your disaster recovery. I think that this is my personal view. Semantics are a thing. And sometimes it's just, if you think about it from the business or your stakeholder perspective, they don't care what it's called. It's what are you doing? Are you recovering IT or supporting them for bringing their business back online? Or are you helping them with communications, which might be crisis management? So yes, of course, internally, you need to know which teams are responsible for which domain, but just be careful that when you're talking to your stakeholders, you're not getting too convoluted with the language. I think sometimes as resilience professionals, we tend to do it. And I'm, guilty of that too, where, there's a million acronyms. So again, yeah, I think it's about that before, during, after, and mapping out which teams are supporting at which phase of an event.
Yeah. Different question. As resilience professionals, we have to be extremely resourceful sometimes. The one question has come through from Danielle. To streamline data and planning, what are your thoughts? What do you think about cloning plans for your business units?
That's a great question. So it definitely makes things go quicker. But of course, like everything, there's pros and cons, right? You could be copying something over and someone doesn't pay attention or they're being lazy and they're just like, yep, approve. So what we like to do as an alternative, if possible, is let's say that you are approaching resilience at a product level or a service level, and you have multiple processes that make up that product or service, that you are collecting the details at the process level, that the core details. And then anything that may vary by product or by service, you would capture in a plan at the product or service level, which allows you to keep that core process information and then account for, let's say you have a product, you're a technology company, and you have a product that is almost the same, just with different teams in the US and the UK. You would essentially have different product plans for the US and UK, but you'd be pulling the data from the same processes. So I wouldn't recommend doing a straight copy paste, but if you can find what the underlying data elements that you can share across the different plans, I think that's a viable option. And of course, if you are resource constrained, sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Question about third party. We have a lot of vendors who have said, as part of their request for, proposals in their pitch, we can layer on AI onto your data and we can create a sequestered and secure environment so that it's not out there for like open AI. However, once they use your data, is it your data anymore? When we think about different research organizations, different marketing organizations, it is whether, even if they anonymize the data, we know that AI can de-anonymize it very quickly and very with like precision accuracy. So how do we enter into those conversations with vendors when like this is our data, even if it's anonymized, it is, formulaically the secret sauce for our company, right?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. And so one, that's why we want our companies to move towards having our own internal AI so that we don't have this issue. But I understand what you're saying. You're saying, oh, well, I use this platform and they're going to layer in AI on top of it and they're ensuring it's going to stay in there. I am not an AI governance expert. That's why we have our AI governance boards, which we're seeing across companies that they're active today. Their membership is growing, and we look to them to provide the guidance on that. It includes legal, privacy, IT, everybody. And a lot of times we are seeing the resilience crisis folks sitting on those governance teams. So I think that's where the decisions are happening there. And resilience can have input into it and should, and if that's one of your areas of expertise. But yeah, I see us more as someone consuming those policies and adhering to them.
Yeah, I think it's a great, as we think about bringing kind of more holistic view to resilience and not necessarily pigeonholing ourselves into business continuity or pigeonholing ourselves into disaster recovery, I think that there is a tremendous gray space in our contract management functions. And as a resilience professional, these are some of the smart questions we can begin to start, asking and doing some research on how we can begin to answer that for sure. Okay, I'm kind of combing through to see if there's any other top questions as we come up on time. I think we've hit them all. If we've missed any, you can type it again if I've missed any, apologies, or we'll go back through and we'll also just try to make sure that we can get to all the questions. We can send emails out or just put on our DRI drive. I think we're in good shape, ladies. Any closing thoughts that you want to offer?
Just really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today, and really appreciate WBCM giving us the forum to talk about data and technology. Don't hesitate to reach out to Alexa or I if you want to continue talking about your data. And also, I'll hand it over to Mitzi to talk about how you can get involved with WBCM, which we hope you do.
Yes, I really do hope you do too. Thank you so much, Alexa and Sydney. We just need to be having these conversations. We think about data, it's like can be dry sounding, to put that mildly, but it's really, I think it's going to be the new leadership currency, right? To be able to look at data, have good data, tell a story with that data. It's going to be front and center for our skill set. So I do think it's something that we're all just going to have to really focus on. Women in Business Continuity, we are part of DRI's foundation. We are an all volunteer committee, and the QR code that's up on your screen is the link to become part of our community. And the first question is, do you have to be a woman? No, Women in Business Continuity Management is open to everyone. In fact, one of my favorite conversations with a member was at DRI 2023, where he came up before a session started at the conference, and he said, is it okay if I join? I'm like, absolutely, it's open to everyone. And he's like, well, I'm a girl dad. I have 3 daughters, and I just know how I want to show up for them and how I want to support them. And I think that the best way for me to do that is to just get educated on things they might be facing. And so that's why I wanted to sit in on the session. So I just love that answer. We have a lot of folks who are just kind of listening in to figure out how do we make sure we have voices amplified, to make sure how do we maybe recognize unconscious bias if it's there. So everyone is welcome. The QR code is there. And you can also find me on LinkedIn as well if you have specific questions about the community. I know that Sydney and Alexa offer too, but like I said at the start, we are not here about hiding or keeping any of the secrets or tools or tips or tricks that we use. We're all about sharing them, and that's 100% what we want to do. This webinar, it's being recorded. It will be on the DRI's site. And so if you have anyone who wasn't able to attend, if you had any technical issues as you were, trying to get started in the beginning, don't worry. Everything that we've shared here, you'll have access to again later on. So, with that, give you about 5 minutes back in your day and have a great rest of the week. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that we can see you on more WBCM Power Hours. And again, I hope I can see you at DRI 2026 in Jacksonville. Take care. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Alexa.